Govinda Dev ki jai. Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Welcome to the ISKCON Kirtan Ministry Sravanam Kirtanam Utsav. This is an initiative begun by the wonderful ISKCON Kirtan Ministry to have an Ekadasi Utsav where, like His Holiness Lokanath Maharaj was saying, we can gather together and gain support and chant with one another through japa, through kirtan, through speaking. And for the next half hour or 45 minutes or so, we'll be hearing the glories of Ekadashi and hearing the glories of the holy name. But of course, we can't do that without singing Jai Radha Madhava and bringing our minds to the right atmosphere in order to hear these wonderful pastimes that are about to unfold and gain all the blessings and benefits that are available to us just by hearing and chanting these wonderful glories on Ekadashi. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari
Jashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari
Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatiravana Chari
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari
Jai Radha Madhava 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 Jai Radha Madhava
Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava
Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda
Shri Radha Madhava ki jai Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. And we have to thank Keshava Madhava on Mridanga and little Nandi playing bells. Thank you guys. So this Ekadashi is known as Putrada Ekadashi. And the story of this Ekadashi comes from this Ekadashi edition of Garga Samhita. We've seen it before. His Holiness Danavir Maharaj has lovingly spent so much time compiling the very many stories within Garga Samhita so that we can have a comprehensive translation with the Sanskrit, with the English, with all of the extended purports. So this book is solely dedicated to Ekadashi, all of her glories, and all of the various stories that go with each Ekadashi. So we'll be hearing from this wonderful book. And this particular Ekadashi comes from the Kurma Purana. Lord Krishna said to Yudhishthir, "My dear king, the Ekadashi which occurs during the waxing moon in the month of December-January is called Putrada. By observing this Ekadashi, all one's sinful reactions are counteracted. People become learned and famous by following this Ekadashi. Now please hear the glories of this auspicious Ekadashi." Of Sri Krishna, just as Yudhishthir Maharaj was able to so many thousands of years ago. There was a city named Suketuman was ruling. The name of his queen was Saivya. Since they had no son, both the king and queen lived their lives in distress. They spent most of their time performing religious activities. Because the king and the queen were afflicted with lamentation, the water that they offered during the time of offering oblation to their forefathers appeared hot. Meanwhile, the forefathers were also worried, thinking that after King Suketuman, no one would be there to offer them oblations. Knowing this distress of the forefathers, the king became even more morose and did not feel any pleasure in the association of his friends, well-wishers, or ministers. Being merged in lamentation and hopelessness, the king considered that without a son, human life is useless. It is impossible to become free from the debts to the demigods, to the forefathers, and to the human beings without possessing a son. Interesting that we are hearing this story during this Ekadashi, because what we hear from Bhagavad Gita is that there is a life hack. Shri Krishna gives us a life hack that if we want to be free from all of these debts to the forefathers, to the living entities, to the demigods, to society, all we have to do is worship him with love and devotion, and somehow he then takes on the role to carry what we lack and preserve what we have. So, if we find that we do not have a child to carry on these different traditions, and we fear for our ancestors, we fear for our debt to society, to the demigods, others, we can simply become as Krishna conscious as we possibly can, and Krishna will take the active role of becoming our very own family member and carrying out anything that is necessary for us. All the rest somehow comes just by us fully dedicating our hearts to Govinda. So, the king considered it is impossible to become free from the debts to the demigods, to the forefathers, and to the human beings without possessing a son. Without heaps of pious activities and devotion to Vishnu, one cannot possess sons, wealth, and knowledge. After concluding in this way for his own benefit, the morose king secretly left for the forest, riding on a horse. King Suketuman entered the forest, which was inhabited by birds and beasts, and began to search for a place to take rest. Within the dense forest, the king saw various trees such as banyan, peepal, date, tamarind, palm, sal, bakul, saptaparna, tilak, tamala, sarala, hingota, arjuna, and others. And he saw various animals such as tigers, lions, wild elephants, deer, wild pigs, monkeys, snakes, leopards, and hares. The king became scared and surprised by hearing the howling of the jackals and the sounds of the owls. Instead of resting, the king then began to wander through the forest. Wandering in this way in all directions, the king soon became very tired. It was midday, and the king was thirsty. He thought, though I have pleased the demigods through worship and sacrifices, maintained my subjects like my own children, and satisfied the brahmanas by offering them foodstuffs and dakshina, still, I am suffering like this today. Being absorbed in this thought, King Suketuman wandered here and there. Suddenly, he saw a lake which was as beautiful as Manasa Sarovar, filled with lotuses. Many swans, chakravaka, and chakora birds were sporting in the waters of that lake. On seeing some sages chanting Vedic mantras on the bank of this lake, the king got down from his horse and offered obeisances to each of them separately. The sages became pleased by the king's behavior and asked him, "O king, we are pleased with you. Please ask us for some benediction." The king said, "Who are all of you? Why have you come to this lake?" The sages replied, "We are Vishvadevas and have come here to take bath. Today is the auspicious Putrada Ekadashi. If a person desirous of a son observes this vow, he is certainly benedicted with a son." The king said, "I have tried so many things to get a son, but until today I have not been successful. Since all of you are pleased with me, kindly bless me with a beautiful son." Then the sages instructed, "Today is Putrada Ekadashi. O king, observe this Ekadashi with great care. Then, by the mercy of the Lord and by our blessing, you will certainly receive a son." Thereafter, following the instruction of the sages, the king observed the auspicious Putrada Ekadashi. On the next day, he broke his fast, and after repeatedly offering obeisances to the sages, he returned to his palace. In due course of time, Queen Saivya became pregnant. By the blessing of the sages and the influence of the piety accumulated by observing Putrada Ekadashi, the king begot a pious and brilliant son. Thereafter, the king happily ruled his kingdom, and his forefathers also became satisfied. Lord Krishna continued, "O King Yudhishthir, by following this Putrada Ekadashi, one can get a son and attain the heavenly planets. Anyone who even hears or sings the glories of this Ekadashi certainly achieves the result of an Ashvamedha sacrifice." Shri Ekadashi Titi ki jai. So we can see just from the very name of this Putrada Ekadashi, Putra means son, Da means to give. So this Ekadashi, Putrada, is one that gives a son. And from very many of my fellow speakers of Krishna consciousness, I've heard one amazing realization. What if you are following this Ekadashi, but you already have a son? What if you are following this Ekadashi and you already have a child? What if you are following this Ekadashi and your goal is not to obtain a child? Then we get the opportunity to have the realization. What is really being cultivated or birthed within our hearts and minds during this Ekadashi fast, following this vow? What is really being brought forth? And that is this love of God, obtained through the chanting of the holy name and the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There are so many of our spiritual masters who have said the same. "O Krishna, you are my father, mother, son, sister, brother, lover, family members. You are my everything. Gauranga Mahaprabhu has said Krishna is your mother, Krishna is your father, Krishna is the jewel, the wealth of your entire life. This is what is possible to achieve on these wonderful Ekadashi days. Lokanath Maharaj was saying that we should hear attentively. We should take the medicine of the holy name that Gauranga Mahaprabhu is so sweetly and freely giving. We are all caught up in a situation where we are hankering for a medicine from this material affliction. No matter who we are, where we are from, in whatever path of life we are situated in, we are constantly being afflicted by material nature in some way, shape, or form. And all of us can see this. It's no clearer than at this time when we are facing a worldwide pandemic. None of us can find our way out of it. We have to pray for the mercy of the holy name to descend within our lives as the supreme medicine that will give all pleasure to our hearts, that will give all peace and solace to every corner of our hearts, and which will afford us real, actual, lasting peace. So, not only does this Ekadashi give the gift of a beautiful child, if one desires it, it also gives the gift of the most beautiful child, bhakti within the heart. Bhakti begins to blossom within the heart. And if we are able to cultivate it with hearing, with chanting, facilitated by the wonderful ISKCON Kirtan ministry, if we can just come to these assemblies, we get the ultimate benefits. Even just one who hears or sings the glories of this Ekadashi achieves the same merit as performing an Ashvamedha sacrifice. That is a sacrifice which is very difficult to perform. A horse sacrifice, complete with over 300 other animals that are involved, and a conquering of all other neighboring kingdoms. In fact, a conquering of the entire world. The entire world must submit themselves to the rule of a particular king before that king can even think about performing this Ashvamedha Yajna. Yudhishthira Maharaj himself performed such a yajna after the battle of Kurukshetra. Sri Ram himself also performs a similar Ashvamedha Yajna. But as merciful and as kind as he is, Sri Krishna has given us another life hack. We don't have the ability to perform such elaborate yajnas. We don't have all of the mantras. We don't have all of the qualified brahmanas. We don't have all of the required wealth. We don't have all of the things in order to perform such wonderful yajnas today. But we can hear and we can chant. That is all that's required. We are able to receive the same merit if we simply hear and chant with faith. When Sri Nityananda Prabhu opens up the marketplace of the holy name, the price is Shraddha, faith. That's it. If he sees just the sheen of a tear in the eye of someone who has maybe just once chanted the name of Gauranga, 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 immediately Nityananda Prabhu says, I must give them prema. I must give them love of God. I must give them prema bhakti. That's it. We can hear and we can chant. That we can do. That's well within our abilities. All that's needed is our faith. And that is something that we are always in control of. No matter what situation in life we find ourselves, rich or poor, knowledgeable or unknowledgeable, whatever station we find ourselves in, famous or not, we are in control of our faith. And we can choose to put our faith in the beautiful hearing and chanting of the glories of Sri Sri Radha Govinda and Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Lokanath Maharaj began this beautiful Utsav, this wonderful festival of hearing and chanting with faith, and he began by reading the celebrated bhajan Jeev Jago, reading Mahaprabhu's own words to the townspeople of Navadvip, of Nadia, as he would go dancing throughout the streets early in the morning. Wake up! Other than me, who is your friend? And so, I thought it would be beautiful to read a little bit of a secret about Mahaprabhu, with your permission. This excerpt comes from the book by Shivaram Maharaj called Naparayaham, where Sri Krishna tells the gopis, I can never repay you. The love that you have shown me, unconditionally, determined, and without cessation, with no stopping, no obstacles were enough to get in your way. I have no way to repay all of that love flowing towards me. I am caught in the riptides of your love. There's nothing I can do. But he thinks of something. He can think of one thing. And I thought to read a little bit from that book where they describe the wonderful secrets of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. It begins. The blissful meeting place of Radha and Krishna is known as Yogapith, or Govinda Stali. Situated at the summit of Vrindavan, surrounded on three sides by the gently flowing waves of the Jamuna, this Yogapith gradually ascends like a turtle's back to appear like 1,000-petaled lotus. Each petal of this lotus is a kunja, and the whirl of the lotus is a great jeweled temple, the sitting place of Radhe Shyam, their Ashtasakis and Ashtamanjaris. Many smaller temples surround Govinda Stali. These jeweled pavilions are covered by wonderful desire trees that have no equal in Swarga or Vaikunta. Here, the sandy bank of the Jamuna defeats the splendor of camphor, for the silver rays of the moon combined with the dancing footprints of Hare increase its glory manifold. All around are countless desire trees and desire vines, whose service is to fulfill the wishes of Shri Krishna. Countless blooming lotuses, playful deer, and happy birds give pleasure to his transcendental senses. The sitting platforms are made of valuable gems, such as lapis, ruby, and diamond, and the soil is golden, with freely scattered stones of sapphires, emeralds, and coral. One night, the bright moonlight awakened Sri Radha's eagerness to see her beloved. To fulfill her desire, Radha's clever girlfriends dressed her in a swan-white sari, smeared her body with white sandal paste, hung a pearl necklace about her neck, and muted her ankle bells with cloth. In this way, Radhika left her house unhindered. As Sri Radha traversed the forest path, she was often frightened by moving shadows, which she mistook for traveling villagers. At times, she hid behind a tree, and at times she proceeded like a cautious fawn. And throughout her nocturnal journey, Radhika, bewildered by ecstatic love, could hardly recognize where she was. Assisted by Yogamaya, she eventually reached Vamsibat, and from there, Imlitala. Meanwhile, in Nandagram, Mother Jashoda put Sri Krishna to bed and narrated stories of Lord Sri Ram as she gazed into his beautiful face. When he closed his eyes to embrace the goddess of sleep, Yashoda stroked his butter-soft body, silently left the room, and closed the door behind her. Clever Hare at once opened his eyes and warily looked here and there. As soon as the palace was quiet, he rose from his bed, silently dressed, and with flute in hand, left through the side door. Like a green parrot entering a green forest, blackish Govinda merged into the darkness behind the palace, stealthily making his way down the alleys of Nandagang. Because people were constantly passing through the city gate, he moved to the rear of the town, which was protected from the moonlight by shade trees. Anxiously proceeding to their meeting place, Hari thought to himself, I wonder if Priyaji has arrived yet. Sri Krishna appeared like the Prince of Shadows, moving quietly amongst his subjects. He blessed them with his footprints and solaced them with his presence. Govinda arrived at the meeting place, but Sri Radhika was still far away, busy dodging shadows and taking encouragement from her Sakis. Radhika's absence created intense anxiety, born from a longing to extinguish the flames of separation that blazed within him. Other than the cooling lake of Sri Radhika's peaceful face, whose curly locks were like buzzing bees, whose lotus eyes were like Kanjana birds, and whose charming smile was its presiding deity, what else could extinguish that fire? For some time, he walked in and out of the kunja. Each time he heard falling leaves, he thought, has she come now? Is that my Priya Sakhi? Then, taking a seat beneath the Imli Tala, a tamarind tree, Sri Krishna comforted himself by seeing Sri Radha's feminine virtues in every nook and corner of beautiful Vrindavan forest. The twisting blackish ways of the Jamuna reminded him of Sri Radhika's braid. The varieties of lotuses reminded him of the flowers that decorated her tresses. The reflection of the moon was the beautiful sheen of her hair, and the aromatic breeze from the river was its supernatural scent. As he gazed at the trees, the creepers, the moon, and the forest, Sri Krishna saw Sri Radha everywhere. Absorbed in thoughts of her, he began to vibrate her name. Radha, 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 and immediately felt ecstasy throughout his entire being. Sri Krishna, being the most qualified connoisseur of transcendental mellows, could only meditate upon someone more qualified than him. While chanting, he thought, one more qualified than me is impossible to find, but in Radha, I feel the presence of one who can give me pleasure. Chanting and chanting the ever-tasty syllables, Radha, Hari appeared to be the king of yogis, in trance, as he entered deep into her unlimited qualities. Radha, 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 Radha. Neither Sri Hari's infinite intelligence, unfathomable heart, nor insatiable spiritual appetite could estimate the spiritual benefit gained by the repetition of Sri Radha's names. How sweet was her name, he could not determine. How great was her name, he could not encompass. How much bliss was in her name, he could not grasp at all. As Sri Radhika came nearer and nearer, Krishna became more and more oblivious to everything but her divine name. And as he became suffused with her mood and qualities through his intense meditation, his blackish Tamalvarna complexion stepped aside to make way for her beautiful golden Suvarna color. Hearing that Shyam Sundar had turned golden, the forest animals flocked to the spot. Even in Braj, where wonders and miracles abound, this was a rare occasion not to be missed. Gazing through the door of the kunja, they beheld Hari, who appeared like a puppet made of butter, a doll cast from gold, or a gopi dressed like himself. The amazed animals simply looked at one another, speechless. Sri Krishna's external appearance was an indication of his mind. The golden complexion illuminating the kunja was but a reflection of Radha's emotions raging within him. In this transcendental state, Sri Krishna was fully immersed in being Srimati Radharani and thought that she was waiting for him. At this opportune moment, Sri Radhika arrived. Although anxious to meet Sri Krishna, she was frightened by the supernatural effulgence permeating the atmosphere. The animals made way for her as Radhika hesitantly peeked inside and saw a golden youth leaning against the tree, deeply absorbed in thought. Perhaps he is a denizen of heaven, or a forest deity, she thought. He must have come to enjoy the forest atmosphere with a sylvan goddess. Radhika quietly retraced her steps and withdrew from the kunja, thinking, Sri Krishna must have come here, seen this god, and decided to go to Yogapith. As she was about to leave, she heard soft chanting, Radha, Radha, Radha. But why would a stranger chant my name, she thought. Drawn by the melodious sound of his voice, Gauri paused for a moment to listen to his singing. It was so sweet. Finally, Radhika recognized the familiar vibration as the one that forever echoed within her own heart. That's Hari's voice, she whispered. Returning to her vantage point, Radhika cleared her love-clouded eyes. It was just as she thought. This golden youth was none other than her dearest one. But what has happened to his natural blackish hue? She mused. Sri Radha was enchanted by her lover's extraordinary form. Although nothing gave her senses greater pleasure than the sight, smell, touch, taste, and sound of his blackish form, this new golden Govinda was astonishingly attractive. After a few moments, Radhika tactfully re-entered the kunja, brushing aside the flowering vines like a daughter of the wind. Krishna, noting her footsteps, slowly opened his lotus eyes. When he beheld Radhika, Govinda was perplexed. His consciousness was so absorbed in her that he was completely convinced that he was Radha. Now, seeing her before him, he did not know who he was or even whether he truly existed. Pressing his elbows to his side and flexing his fingers, Krishna reassured himself that he possessed a form and that his form was indeed different from hers. With a startled voice, half question, half statement, he said, Radha? You are Radha. Radhika thought it prudent to remain silent. She simply smiled and tilted her head graciously to one side. Meanwhile, with the poignant redawning of his identity, Sri Krishna's golden color faded, and his blackish complexion returned. And along with his hue, Sri Krishna's personality as the spirited Cupid of Vrindavan Dham was restored. Seeing him again as the son of Maharaj Nanda, Sri Radhika approached like a mystical doe and sat to his left upon the flower-covered platform. Sundar, she said in a honey-streamed voice, what a wonderful form I saw in you just now. Holding his hand, she asked, how did you assume that golden complexion? Sri Krishna replied, O Radha, the magical influence of your name took possession of my heart and made me one with you. I felt like a gopi, anticipating Sri Krishna's arrival. Absorbed in that mood, I happily wandered through the floral garden of your myriad ecstasies, and when you entered the kunja, I was brought back to my external consciousness. Sri Radha declared, you are transcendence personified. Nothing happens in Braj's kingdom independent of your will. This golden form must be eternal and full of significance. Will you be kind enough to explain it to me? Smiling at her astute discernment, Sri Krishna replied, Devi, it is as you say. When I adopt the devotional treasures of your heart and cover my complexion with yours, I am known as Gauranga. This very confidential form, known only to highly elevated sages, is concealed within the heart of the Vedas. Radha repeated the name Gauranga, Gauranga, Gauranga with a cheerful laugh. What a wonderful name! How sweet is its golden resonance! When I chant Gauranga, I feel as if I'm chanting your name. Not only my name, said Hari. When you chant Gauranga, you chant both our names. The syllables Gaura Anga are non-different from Radha Krishna, as there is no difference between the form of Gauranga and our combined forms. The two names are identical. Radhika was wonderstruck. Her soft lips trembled in ecstasy. Krishna continued, in the age of Kali, wrapped in your complexion, immersed in your heart's mood, I will appear on the earth to distribute the treasure of Braja Prem. This form of Gauranga freely distributes what no incarnation has ever given before, the ecstasy of our loving service. Oh, how wonderful, sang Radha, how wonderful. As Gaura, I will taste the sweetness, happiness, and greatness of your love. I will also taste the love of your devotees within and without Braj. By your grace, I will be supremely opulent with prem, and I shall distribute it freely among my associates, devotees and non-devotees alike. Sri Radha felt a bit slighted. Oh Sundar, you are truly magnanimous in this Gaura avatar, but tell me, by what means do you acquire my bhav to know the feelings within my heart? Shri Krishna smiled. Your holy name empowers me with all potencies. In that empowered state, I relish all the diverse moods of your love. Turning slightly with a gleam in his eye, Hari teasingly added, and of course, when you are not looking, I may enter your heart and plunder the jewel of its contents to my satisfaction. From his side, Govinda was convinced he had every right to fulfill his duty as the Yuga avatar. Kali Yuga had enough impediments of its own, without Radhika contributing her reluctance. In any case, what was there to lament? Throughout the universe, his deity forms accepted offerings of food and then replaced the preparations for the pleasure of his devotees. In the same way, whatever he would take from her heart would remain as before. That was his inconceivable potency. As fate would have it, both Radha and Govinda were firmly fixed in their opinion on his borrowing her emotions. Thus a loving quarrel erupted, hearing which the birds, creepers, and trees were all delighted. Within the witty argument, Shri Radha and Krishna expressed the confidential truths of Lord Gauranga's pastimes, and they revealed them to the forest of Vrindavan Dham. Thank you all so much for being with us for this Ekadashi Katha, and for hearing the glories of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. I look forward to being with you again for the next Ekadashi Utsav. This was truly a celebration, and I'm so eager to see what the next presenter will do. Thank you, and Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Hare Krishna, Krishna Ram Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Hare, 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 Ram Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Hare Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Krishna Hare Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare.
The Mahamantra, try to absorb in holy name and feel the nectar of it. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,